Thank you very much, Narmin. Dear colleagues, it's a big honor to give some introductory remarks at our event. I'm very pleased to see a group of researchers who contribute to studies in archaeology, architecture, and cultural heritage studies in the South Caucasus gathered in one place. Addressing the main goals of our event, I would point out the large and growing ecological, social, and economic challenges faced by humanity today, which are interlinked in very complex ways. Among the most pressing of these is the climate crisis, rooted in the excessive land use. While often framed in global or abstract terms, these crises are fundamentally shaped by very concrete human activities, particularly in the food and construction sectors, including the mining of materials like stone or metals. Together, these sectors account for nearly 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions, with the world population expected to surpass 9 billion by 2050, and more than two-thirds of that population projected to live in urban areas. The demand for buildings and infrastructure will only grow in the next years. A burning question at today's event is, which I suppose will run as a red thread throughout the day, is what we can learn from traditional construction methods in order to realize a circular economy and build in a climate resilient and sustainable way in the future. In particular, which manifestations of these aspects are present in the South Caucasus? Now, the question of sustainable architecture has been an issue for researchers, but also for policymakers for a while. For example, the European Green Deal is the EU's roadmap to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by about 2050. Within this broader vision, green architecture plays a critical role, especially in the areas of sustainable construction, energy efficiency, and circularity. Architecture under this plan should prioritize circular economy principles using renewable and recyclable materials while reducing the environmental footprint throughout the building's life cycle. As a representation of this, let us say, ideology, the German government has chosen to have a draft design here in Tbilisi made of rammed earth for a new embassy building. Nevertheless, however, this project has been suspended due to political issues, or better to say, is halted by political issues. However, the message was clear. Germany encourages the usage of sustainable architecture in the region. Funny enough, similar pillars of architecture were already formulated in the classical era about 2000 years ago. According to Vitruvius, in the 10 books of architecture, he formulates three main requirements for architecture: its strength, usefulness, and beauty. Speaking of building materials, Vitruvius already notes that the usage of materials should rely on locally found ones and should possibly avoid expensive transport. So Vitruvius is putting geological and climatic prerequisites as the most important ones. In this talk, I will discuss two aspects: the choice of material and the geological, or better to say landscape, issues connected to sustainable architecture, focusing mostly on examples from Armenia. As for the materials, examples of those which can be reused, recycled, or biodegraded naturally include timber, straw bales, rammed earth, or sun-dried bricks. Well, naturally, the South Caucasus is characterized by a rich availability of building stone, unlike other regions such as Mesopotamia. But mud brick was also widely used from the beginning of the 6th millennium BCE in the Ararat Valley, for example. along the Araxes River. Groups of settlements appeared, for example, in Aratashen, Aknashen, Masispelur. The buildings found in these settlements usually have a circular or elliptical layout with already diameters ranging from 3 or to 6 meters. In following years, during the so-called Kura Araxes period, mud bricks became truly the most important building material. For example, rectangular bricks were widespread and, unlike square ones, allowed for greater diversity in layout, making it possible to build walls of varying thicknesses. More about this we will hear in the following talk by Narmin Ismailova, who will present the early Bronze Age in Azerbaijan. Of course, mud brick was used in later periods such as Middle and Bronze Ages and the early Iron Age, but it did not constitute the main building material, which was stone. Famous constructions include Cyclopean masonry, which consisted of unworked boulders stacked on each other. Mud bricks, however, mud brick was, however, largely used in other parts of the Near East. For example, in the central Turkey, the capital of Hittite Empire in Hattusha, it had city walls made of mud brick. This is a restored view of it. A sort of revival of mud brick architecture came with the spread of the Urartian Empire. The rapid development of architecture and urban planning led to a standardization of building materials, which had to be produced quickly and in large quantities. Mud brick was used not only in the construction of representative buildings, but also in fortifications. Bricks were made from clay in wooden balls and used either raw or fired. They came in square and rectangular shapes. Using bricks of different shapes at the same time allowed for stronger interlocking. Wall thicknesses, especially for domestic buildings, could be up to 2 to 3 meters for fortifications, even thicker. More often, unfired bricks were used in the fortress of Erebuni, for example, in the modern-day Yerevan. Anti-seismic construction was used. Raw brick walls were reinforced with wooden elements. Here, in the reconstruction, the mud brick part is missing, but it should have been on the stone ones, like it is the case in Hattusha. Well, but generally the use of mud brick with its very flexible and ecological qualities can be easily connected to the organization of the state, at least in the Urartian period, where the state attempted to centralize building material standards, for example, by employing specialist focus on the material, which was required during fast construction processes in the times of war or other state important activities. I won't go into details concerning the medieval and modern day usage of mud brick, except to mention that in medieval Armenian architecture, the dominant building was in fact stone, but earthen architecture did not completely disappear. A series of vernacular buildings made of earth are still standing in the Ararat Valley, which will be presented by Gayane Erkoyan later today. Also in old town of Yerevan, there are residential houses partially built by mud brick. In fact, they are endangered and projects to repair them remain very topical. In the district of Qom, a civic movement is fighting for their preservation. Coming to the aspect of landscape, the South Caucasus is, of course, characterized by mountainous terrain with many high-altitude settlements. Rock-cut architecture is one of the most harmonious expressions of integration with the landscape. In such cases, the spaces used by humans are not placed on the landscape, but rather within it. The cultural environment that is created is fully adapted to the natural one. These types of towns are known in southern Armenia, in the region of Syunik, Some examples include Goris, Khanzoresk, I know it's a bit hard to pronounce, Ter and Karashan, and several other villages. Sometimes the natural rock formation was supplemented by small built structures. It is common to find wooden porches and balconies constructed on the entrance of the caves. Occasionally, stone buildings were also erected adjacent to the road. This type of dwellings, of course, is also known from Georgia, like famous sites in David Gareja or Bardia. And also, there are attempts to build hotels or hostels in the rocks in the village of Khanzores for tourists. So I hope it will be finished and you can visit. Similar to rock-cut dwellings are the terraced settlements. In this case, the structures are partially rock-cut, and the flat roof of one house serves as a courtyard for another resident living one level above. This kind of settlement can be found in Syunik, but also in other parts of Caucasus, especially throughout the greater Caucasus range. Coming back to my initial question, what can we learn from traditional construction methods? I found a very good example of the Armenian 20th century innovative architectural school. Very famous Soviet avant-garde researcher from Dagestan, Selimkhan Magomedov, considered the Armenian innovative architectural school of the 1920s, 30s to be among the first, not only in the USSR but globally, successfully combining contemporary architecture with the national building traditions. An example for that is the architect Mikhail Mazmanyan. Based on vernacular architecture, he designed the workers' settlement of Kapan. The urban planner applied the terraced construction typical for traditional Armenian architecture, and the settlement was planned to be built on the side of an old village designed for a population of about 6,000 people. The residential buildings were arranged on the slopes in the terraced layout, where the roof of one house served as a courtyard for the other house on the level above. Gardens were placed among the houses. This was very well received even by the Central Committee, but in the end it was implemented only in a very small scale. Nevertheless, this is yet another example of how modern architecture can learn from the building of historical periods. What we can learn, or what we can postulate, is that from traditional construction methods, the sustainability was never an abstract ideal, but a practical necessity rooted in local materials, climate, and landscape. The South Caucasus offers a rich architectural heritage from examples like mud brick architecture or terrace settlements that demonstrate how ecological thinking was once embedded in building culture. By studying and reviving these traditions, we gain not only technical knowledge but also a cultural framework for designing climate resilient and circular futures. And why it is more important than ever to actively study traditional architecture and maintain the exchange between researchers, which is exactly what we aim to initiate today. Thank you very much for your attention.